Hey, what's going on, YouTube? Welcome back to a brand new episode of For the Love of Humankind. As always, I am Jeff. You can find me on Twitter at JCWithTheShot, on Instagram, this is Jay Cox, and you can find me on Twitch at JCWithTheShot as well. So I want to welcome you all to the first multi-part series here on the podcast, where the conversation will span more than one episode. And I'm super excited to start this conversation because this is something, before I even progress further into this podcast and exploring more stories, I think it's important for you all to know my story. And I think it's important for you to understand how I got to this point. I'm still trying to figure out how I got to this point sometimes, and I want to explore that with you all. I talked about this a little bit in my last episode, that the original plan was to put this out as episode 2 and 3, but life happened. My grandfather passed away, and so here we are, episode 3 and 4, maybe 5. We'll see how it goes. But welcome back to For the Love of Humankind. Welcome again. Oh, that opener never gets old, let me tell you. So before I even, go into this conversation, I want to give you a little bit of a backstory of how it started. So this series is called the Spoken Heart Project. And this is something that I have worked on for a number of years. It started out as a series that I want to do of people's stories, shared through poetry and shared through other forms of vocal expression. To give you an insight of what I'm talking about, here is the video that started it all.
So my name is Jeff, not to be confused with Channing Tatum, although we look a lot alike. I'm going to be doing a little spoken word poetry for all of you. These are original pieces, so I have 2 of them that I want to share. The first one really means a lot to me because if you have seen 13 Reasons Why, there are people in our lives that go way too soon, so this is dedicated to them. So let me tell you a story of a close friend. A friend that meant so much to others, but at times just didn't feel so supported. A friend that at times felt the world was against them far too often, and they never spoke about it. A friend that decided to end their book only chapters in with a period. See, you never quite know what's on the mind of one's paper. You never quite know the entire story behind their why. Their ink bleeds through like they're expecting someone to catch it. Their lines divided by semicolons and silence. The author who they are decided not to end a sentence yet, that they still don't know what comes next. We become too caught in what's right in front of our eyes, but let me tell you, sometimes you have to read between the lines. The lines at times that blur from the drops from their eyes and the crooked lines from their smile on days they try to hide the fact that there's nothing wrong, nothing to see, nothing to keep those around from losing track of their lines. We each have a story that we are trying to find the conclusion. My conclusion, not yet written. My friend's conclusion, the final period has been placed. No one to read the subtle metaphors and similes suggesting they needed help. No one comprehended that their lines were bleeding. No one read their story. No one read their story until the final pen mark. Have you ever read a book just by reading the first and last chapter? Like when we see Harry alone on Privet Drive and then suddenly he's standing on 9 3/4 with his kids. There's no middle, no substance, no getting to know what's happening. We don't find his struggles or the things he has overcome. We just assume everything is fine, even when it's not. My lines are not your lines, and your lines are not my friend's lines. But when I'm struggling with my ink, beginning to bleed and lines beginning to converge, I write my semicolon. It's not over, it's a new start. We choose to read what we want, and we often miss the most important part of the story that's so deeply hidden between the lines. Don't let today be someone's last page. Help them continue their story.
Awesome. So I like to look back at that because I think I have come a long way in developing who I am as a person since that point in time. So I wrote and performed that poem when I was in grad school at the University of Akron, and that was in 2017 is when I performed that. So 4 years ago, the idea of the Spoken Heart Project had started. Fast forward to 2021, and the Spoken Heart Project is still in existence, but it exists in a different form and capacity. And that's kind of what I want to talk about because, again, I think it's important for you all to understand who I am and why I even started this podcast. Why, I'm having these conversations and talking about these things, right? I'm not just some random person on the internet that you might be listening to or stumbled upon and are like, damn, why is this guy even talking? Why does he have a podcast? I couldn't tell you. Like, if you're sitting here listening, like, I appreciate you listening to this, but sometimes life has a weird way of working out, and this is what I have found to enjoy is having these deeper conversations. And so the Spoken Heart Project, as I said, originally was this idea that I formed that I wanted to start a series of individuals sharing experiences that they had in life through poetry. And poetry for me has been a huge part of my life that I don't necessarily talk about a lot because it's kind of faded off a little bit the older I get. But for me, and I'm going to talk about this in the series, poetry really kind of saved my life in more ways than one. And so as we kind of dive into the story of the Spoken Hearts Project, I really want to keep that at the forefront of a lot of things because it started with poetry. That's how this all began. And I think it's interesting to see it, I don't necessarily want to say end, but to see it continue into a podcast. So fast forwarding, another year into 2018, I went out on this adventure to start writing a book. And this book was titled, ironically enough, The Spoken Hearts Project, which for me was almost like an autobiography in a sense. I wanted to showcase the things that have happened in my life in a way that I felt was going to help people. It was a book set on resiliency, and it still exists. Like, this book is still technically a work in progress, and I'm going to talk about that in the series, but it's always been about resiliency. A lot of my life has been about resiliency, and I can say that about a lot of other people's lives. Resiliency is a key part to anybody's life. And if you're unfamiliar with what resiliency is the idea or concept. I don't even know if it's like technically a concept, it's more of this is what it is. It's how an individual responds to something negative in their life. So, for example, when I like to share this with students or staff that I supervise, I share with them a quote that has been shared, within the Dark Knight series. So the Batman series, there is this quote um, that Alfred says to Bruce Wayne, and he says, "Master Wayne, why do we fall?" And then he says, "So we can learn to pick ourselves back up again." And that is a definition of resiliency if I've ever heard of it, right? This idea that no matter what happens in our life, we find a way to get past that and move on and grow from it. And that's resiliency. That is what the Spoken Hearts Project has been about from the start. In that video, in the poem that I shared, I talk about some of these things. And resiliency is not easy. And as this podcast progresses, resiliency is going to continue to come up. People, and my hope, I haven't filmed any of these episodes yet, but my hope is that people will share some of these stories of when they were at their lowest and how they overcame that to be and get to the point that they're at. There are so many things in life that stop us or block us from getting to our goals or getting to our final destination that we often just want to give up. I'll give you a really good example of this because this week, particularly for me, has been really, really difficult. And I say that not to put backing on this, but I share that because if I'm not honest with myself, I can't be honest with other people. And this week's been really, really difficult because I have, since recording my last podcast episode, have really tried to put a lot of my life into perspective. What am I spending my time doing, and where are my passions? How am I showing up in different spaces? And it's been really hard to comprehend because I have got to the point this week, and I don't know if this was just like because I was sitting there and really just thinking about it, like, do I want to keep streaming? Do I want to keep playing games? Like, do I actually enjoy these things? And I would be lying to myself if that's not something that I thought about the more often the older I get. And I don't know if that's truly where I'm at, right? I think part of it is feeling some of that regret of not spending enough time with my grandfather before he passed within the last year. And I think that has a lot to do with where my mental health has been over the last week. It's hard to comprehend losing somebody like that. And so that's been one of the roadblocks for me this week. And I'm really trying to think of the impact that I've had on some of these individuals in my stream, and I want to continue to do that. It's not that I don't enjoy it. I think I'm at this point in my life where I'm trying to figure out what matters and what doesn't. And the relationships that I've formed in that capacity truly do matter to me. I spent a lot of time playing video games with two of my best friends. I may not be enjoying video games this week, but that doesn't mean I don't enjoy spending time with them. And it happens to me more often than not that I get in these blocks. And I share these things because I need to figure out how I get past this and how I move on. How do I grow from the feelings that I have now into stronger dedication and motivation next week, right? And that's resiliency. We all find forms of it in our lives. And as I continue to talk about this project over the next few episodes, I hope that you see some of that and see that, you know, the way that we approach situations or scenarios in our lives really dictates what's next for us as we go forward. And that's not necessarily something that they teach you in school. You know, and I think about these things on a daily basis because I don't want to be a stagnant person. I don't want the skills that I have now to be the only skills that I ever have or ever know. Like I want to grow from who I am and change every day. You know, not every person wants that. But if you're really striving to get to a point in your life, whether that's, you know, wanting to play baseball for a living, whether that's wanting to be a chef for a living, whether that's, you know, wanting to stream for a living, at some point, you need to understand that what you're doing right now probably is not the best practice to get you to the point that you want to be. So you got to learn and you got to grow and accept the fact that we don't know everything that we need to know. We're not doing everything that we need to do, right? And as I share some of the experiences of my life through these next few episodes, I hope you see some of the lessons that I've learned and take those, you know, to heart and understand that no matter the shit show that life may present itself sometimes, there's going to be something to learn and gain from that experience. And so going back to the start of the Spoken Hearts project, you know, I wanted to create this experience for people to be able to share through poetry. That failed miserably. I think I had one person that expressed interest in doing it. And I was like, okay, well, I guess I'm not going to do this anymore. Okay. And then I didn't. And it wasn't until a year and a half later that I was like, dang, this would be a really good opportunity to share my story and share it through resiliency. You know, one of the things that I've always talked about in my life and wanting to be able to do is host a TEDx or a TED Talk surrounding mental health and surrounding resiliency. Because I think that some of the things that I have encountered in life, I've wanted just to quit. And to be honest, I have tried to quit. And I'll get to that point because it's not always a happy story. You know, I come across as a very happy individual, but that's not always the case. You know, you don't know what's behind somebody's smile. You know, and I think that says a lot because you just never know what somebody's experience was. And so for me, writing has been a sanctuary for a long time. You know, I've talked about wanting to write a book for quite some time as well. As I stated, this turned into a book. And the book has not been finished. And I'll get to that and you know, towards the end of the series of why that is. But I really want to just focus on, you know, the start of the Spoken Hearts project. Because I started it as an autobiography talking about resiliency and everything that could happen in life, what's made me who I am, and why I'm here. And so to start the book, I start talking about being born, and we don't remember the experiences of being born. Um, I don't think it's up until like age 3 or 4 that we can really recollect any memories. There are, and even then, I don't know if those memories actually exist or if those are memories that have essentially been fabricated through looking at pictures from back then. So I don't know. I couldn't tell you when my first memory was. Like there are a lot of things that I remember doing as a kid, but also I don't know if that's because I saw pictures of them or old home movies that makes me remember those things. So it the book starts with me, being born in 93, so I turned 28 this year. Holy shit. And it talks about me being born in a suburb of Detroit. I was born in Melvindale, Michigan, and I was born, to a family that lived in the area. So about 8 months into me being born, that's such a weird way to say that. When I was about 8 months old, I was put up for adoption and was adopted by my parents that I have now and have had for the entirety of my life, um, except for those first 8 months. So it's crazy because people will often say, "Oh, you look so much like your parents." And over the last couple weeks, I've had people say, "Oh, you look so much like your grandpa." And it's crazy because, like, genetically, I'm not linked to them at all. But to me, like, that's all I know as a family. And I'm fine with that, you know? And so, growing up, I grew up in a super small town in Michigan. Um, to put into perspective, um, my high school graduating class had 52 students in it. Everybody knew everybody in the town, and everybody knew everybody's business. You couldn't get away with anything in that town, um, even if you tried. Everybody talked, and so my mom and dad, adopted me when I was 8 months old. They gave me a tremendous life, um, and I'm very, very thankful for that because I don't think I would be here in this position today if they hadn't adopted me. Um, I don't know where I'd be, to be honest. And so, growing up as an only child, I definitely was spoiled. I'm still spoiled at the age of 27. Um, Still spoiled by my mom. Love her very dearly. And I'll talk more about our relationship in this series as we go. Um, but I remember, spending time at our house when I was younger, and we lived in on the back roads, in the middle of the woods. We had a pond that was right next to our house as well, and so I spent a lot of time outside. Spent time fishing. I never touched the fish, never touched worms. They creeped me out. My dad would always do that, and I remember having one of those old school um, yellow and red cars. I'm gonna post a picture that I would run around in relentlessly outside. I would play soccer, and I had the swing set that I would play on, and it was great. Um, had a cat growing up. Um, the first pet that I ever had name was Velvet, all black cat. Um, and I loved that cat. And I will tell you that even years after, um, the cat passed away, I would randomly cry and break out in tears because I missed that cat, which is crazy, and which was probably a good um, hint that I was gonna be an emotional person. Um, if even at a young age I was crying over a cat that had been gone for years. Huh. I didn't think about that. That's probably why I'm super emotional today. Um, but ended up, playing sports growing up. Played soccer, played baseball, played basketball, played football. All of the I feel like typical things that you would do growing up. And I lived a pretty good life growing up. And I think about when I was in elementary school, um, there are a couple instances that really stick out to me that I think was part of my development as a person. One of those was thinking back to when I was in fifth grade. I went through this phase where I would not wear jeans. The only thing I would wear, even during the winter, were shorts and NBA jerseys. That is all I would wear. I would wear like the long track pants to school, and then when I got to school, I would take those track pants off, so I would just wear those shorts. I don't know why I thought that was a great idea at fifth grade, walking around in jerseys every single day, glasses and braces, and I was a little shit. I was a nerd. Like I think back to the day that I got braces and glasses, and I can picture it because I remember walking into the classroom with them on. Because like they were these like oval, like deep blue shaped glasses, or deep blue shaded glasses, oval shaped. Um, and I thought I was hot shit. It was great. It was not. It was not great. Um, so that's one of the memories that I think about a lot. And then sixth grade comes, and this is when things get questionable, and I think my morality really started to get tested in sixth grade more than it had been. Um, in sixth grade, we had these agendas that we had to write down, like due dates and homework in, and then we had to take it home and get signed by our parents every night, or else like we like got detention. I don't. Something happened if we didn't get it signed. We like get a failing grade for that. I don't really remember off the top of my head, but what I do remember is forgetting to have my mom sign my agenda and forging her signature in the agenda. And I thought the signatures looked like a match. But one of my teachers did not think that. And she pulled me into an empty room, an empty classroom, to call my mom to let her know I was going to have after school detention for it. I was a hot mess. I was this kid growing up that never did anything wrong, that never got in trouble. And then here I am getting an after school detention for doing something I didn't know was technically illegal. Because I just didn't know. I was like, okay. So I got after school detention. And I was like, shit, now what? Like, this teacher's gonna hate me. Like, how do I move forward from this? Um, I still laugh at it because I can remember the conversation that we had. I like can visually see everything that took place in that moment. The other moment that I remember is there was one day that I was at recess and I think we were playing football. It was either football or soccer. And our games usually got pretty intense. Like it was two-hand touch, but like there were days where you gave the extra like push um to your friends. And then there was a day that one of my friends fell. His name was Colin, and him and I were really good friends, into high school and played soccer together. He now looks like Nicolas Cage, which he always had a fascination for, which I just think is so ironic. There was one day that he fell on the ground, and I was like walking over to him to try and help him up. And then one of the recess ladies, which is really weird to say now, recess chaperones. Anyway, they were hired by the school to like be there for recess to watch, make sure, none of the kids did anything stupid. Thought that I had kicked him while he was down. And both of us got taken to the main office. And we were both told that we were going to have a week's worth of recess detention. And I was just sitting there like, excuse me, like I didn't do anything. They're like, no, we watched you kick him. And even he was like, he didn't kick me. He was coming to try and help me up. And they were like, oh, we don't believe you. So we both got detention for a week. No recess. And so we were like the talk of our class because people were like, oh, you two got in a fight? And we're like, no, like he literally tripped. I was coming to help him up, and then they said that I kicked him. That is one of my worst memories of school growing up. Because I didn't deserve that detention. He didn't deserve that detention. Like, even if he was getting kicked, like, why is he in detention, But I was thinking, okay, like, how do I change my behavior? Like, I'm typically the student that, is highly, like, recommended. That sounds weird to say. By teachers, and talked very highly, especially during, like, parent-teacher nights. And now I've had after-school detention for forgery, and I've had a week's worth of recess detention for kicking somebody while they were on the ground. One of which happened, one of which did not. But I was like, I can't go to this school anymore. Like, they're gonna think that, I don't deserve to be here. And those two moments, I laugh at now because I'm like, at the time, God, it seemed like the end of the world. After school detention. Oh no, I couldn't go home and watch whatever I was watching. Because video games weren't terribly, terribly prevalent in my life at that point. So why did that matter to me if I had to stay after school, like 45 minutes or an hour? I don't know. It wasn't even that long of a time. Or recess detention, like, and honestly, recess detention, I have a lot of qualms with that. I don't know if it still exists, but it is literally inhumane. Because students need kids. I'm not even going to say kids. Kids need that time to go outside, get rid of their energy, take a mental break, But recess detention, you're literally just sitting in a classroom. Literally inhumane. If you've had recess detention, I'd love to hear that in the comments and what it was for, or after school detention for that fact. So going into high school, our high school was a little bit different. Our high school, we had 7th grade through 12th grade. And to give you perspective, there were 365 students between 7th and 12th grade when I was there, which is not many at all. For some of you that are probably watching this, your graduating class probably might have had close to that many. And so it's wild to think about that and perspective. So 7th grade comes, going into high school, super excited, ready to just jump into things. 7th grade basketball, and our high school didn't have soccer at that time. So it was really just football and basketball. That we played, because we didn't even have the ability to play baseball. We still had to play, like, what was it, U12, Fastbit, U12, something like that. Little League, one of those we still technically had to play in that until we hit 9th grade. So played football, and very, very quickly found out that I did not like playing football in 7th grade. I was a bigger kid, but I also couldn't stand being hurt, and I couldn't stand pain. So imagine a younger Jeff trying to wear glasses inside a football helmet. Terrible idea. I didn't wear contacts at that point. Forced to be a lineman because he's a little chunky boy. And you're set up to do hitting drills in 7th grade. I kid you not, I quit playing football halfway through 7th grade. I played like it was called Wolfpack is what I played in elementary, but playing in 7th grade, it's like the 7th graders and 8th graders on a team. I had a bruise one day, and I came home from practice, and my mom was like, "You are not going back. You are quitting." I had a bruise that was like the entirety of my arm, just black and blue. Like, I'm pretty sure I either took a helmet or shoulder pads straight to the arm multiple times, but it looked terrible. And so I quit. Focused on basketball. I was still a little chunky boy playing basketball. Like, I was out of shape. I was so out of shape. And I got made fun of a lot in 7th and 8th grade because of I was fat. I was. And so I was bullied a lot during those years, and it was really, really difficult for me. Even into 9th grade, like, I was still, heavier set. I hadn't hit puberty yet, really. I had, all this weight. I was being bullied, and that's when I think I had some of my dark times growing up. There were days that I didn't want to live, and there were days that I would come home, I would watch TV, I would not talk to my mom about these things. I would suppress all of that anger and pain, but I would talk to other people about it. I would talk to friends about it, and this is right around the time that texting really blew up. So to give you perspective, of my lifespan, um, I've seen dial-up internet. I've seen AOL Instant Messenger, MSN Messenger, the development of texting and it blowing up, a time where you had to pay for the amount of minutes you have, and that also included how many text messages you could send a month. Um, through and then to technology now. Um, Texting, my first texting plan only had 250 messages a month. That's sending and receiving. So combined, 250 messages, which some of you probably send in a day. And so around this time is when I really started texting some of my friends about these things. And, I talked about feeling depressed. I talked about, you know, wanting to kill myself. They would talk about those things in return. We would really just be there for each other. And that's where I really found it interesting that I attracted people into my life that were struggling with some of the same things that I was struggling with. And I feel like that still kind of happens. There's a reason I'm in the field that I'm in, and there's a reason that I have the conversations that I do, is because I've been through a lot of stuff, and I want to be able to help people get through those things just as I did. And so I struggled a lot in those years. And I know that those are years that typically most people struggle in, those prepubescent years. And, there's a lot of changes, there's a lot of moodiness that happens. And so it's probably not uncommon for people to experience that. But that's not something that I shared with my parents. And I didn't go to counseling then, and counseling wasn't really a thing that was talked about as much as it probably is now. um, and so during all of that, I was also spending time going to youth group at church, and every Sunday night we would go. I loved going because it gave me an opportunity to play basketball with friends, play dodgeball. I went more for the activities and the social aspect rather than like the actual message um, that they were having that night. Um, we would watch. Oh my gosh, what is the show called? Um, oh my gosh, I'm gonna forget it. I'm gonna share it towards the end of this. But there used to be a show that had like this character that had like a star on his head, that was kind of like a superhero, but not. And there'd be all these different experiences he has. And so I'm gonna share a picture of that as well, with the name of it once I figure it out. But I would go just to do that stuff. Like, didn't really go to church growing up. My parents never really went, so religion was never huge, in my lifestyle, as I grew up as a kid. And it wasn't until ninth grade that really changed for me. Um, Eighth grade was one of the first times that I tried to take my life, um, and failed. Um, Super thankful for that. Um, but I just didn't see myself being in a better place than I was. I hated being bullied. I hated um, going to school. I was really good at school, was always on the honor roll, but I hated going because I was like, oh, if I run into this person, they're going to say something. Um, and once one person starts, more add on to that. And so I really struggled in those early years in high school. Um, and I look back at some of the writing that I did, some of the poetry that I wrote, and it's very, very evident that I was hurting. Um, I talked about, love a lot in my poems. Um, because I was like, oh, I'm in love with this person. I'm in love with this person. Like it's just easy to write about it. Um, and now I don't know. Love is like a foreign language to me. I don't understand it. Um, and so, oh my gosh, I was something else. But it wasn't really as I was saying. Really wasn't until I hit ninth grade that things really started to change for me. Um, and I think about high school, and I think about all of the things that I did, after the fact that I tried to take my life, um, that I would never have been able to experience if I would have been successful, right? Um, and I'm super thankful that I didn't succeed in that. Super, super thankful. Even to this day. Because even though life is hard, there are always things that are brighter that are coming. I know sometimes it's easy to say, oh, but it's never going to get better from this point. Like it's always going to be dark in my life. But there is light. It's just taking that experience or that situation that you're in or that time that you're in, making some adjustments and getting you to a point that is beneficial for you. And that's a lot about what my story has been from the beginning to now. Resiliency is key. It really is. And so I'm going to end the first episode of this series there. So in the next episode, we'll return starting with my freshman year in college. Or not freshman year in college. Oof. My freshman year in high school. And I'll talk to you about some of those things. At some point, you are going to be all caught up to this point in my life and why I started this podcast. Because it's all connected. And I challenge you, if you have struggled to listen to some of these things, or, the talk of ideating and things like that, I encourage you to talk to somebody about it. If these are things that you are feeling currently, please reach out to somebody. That's not something that I did. And I wish I would have sooner. I'm also going to leave the suicide hotline number in the comments or in the description of this video, because I think that if you truly are in a dark place and need that, I really want you to utilize that. Because if you don't feel like you have anybody to turn to, there is somebody always available on that line. And I know that we're not ending this episode on a super high note, but a high note of this is that I am still here to be able to tell that story and talk about the things that I have done to get to this point. So, if you've made it this far into the podcast, I thank you so much for listening. If you could please comment, like, share, subscribe, all of those YouTube things, that would be great. I want my story to get out there to people, and as this podcast grows, I want other people's stories to get out there as well. So until next time, please take care of yourself. Please, for the love of humankind, tell somebody you care about them. Tell somebody you love them. Because we all deserve love. at the end of the day. Thank you, and